Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is Moneyline with Nancy, and I am Nancy Naji. So far, President Buhari will be the president that has amassed the biggest loan so far in Nigeria. President Buhari is Nigeria's biggest borrower with about 70 trillion naira in his kitty as he leaves office in the next few days for the next president. According to the DMO, Nigeria's total public debt stood at 46 trillion naira at the end of December 2022 as a result of the approval from the National Assembly for President Buhari to restructure and securitize close to 23 trillion naira ways and means from the Central Bank of Nigeria. President Buhari becomes Nigeria's biggest borrower. President Buhari is seeking an approval from the Senate for the $800 million World Bank loan to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal. President Buhari's request is born out of the fact that when the fuel subsidy is removed, about 50 million Nigerians, 50 million vulnerable Nigerians will benefit from the $800 million loan and about 10 million households. So it could be 10 million households or 50 million vulnerable Nigerians. What will the next administration do since there is no adequate funds really in the purse of the federal government? The Budget Office of the Federation has also raised concerns that there may not be so much headroom for us to borrow anymore. President Buhari, in the last 8 years, now at the slightest financial pressure, goes to borrow. That's what we're looking at on today's edition of the program. And in case you don't know the intensity of what we're talking about, as a Nigerian, you are owing over 380,000 naira. You are owing over 380,000 naira. I'm owing 380,000 naira. That is over it. Where do we go from here? That's the program today. And we will start very quickly. Let's take a break to bring in my guest, Dr. Tokpe Fashola, will be joining me to speak about that. He's an economist. The second half of the program, I'll be talking with Dr. Linus Okoro, who will be speaking about why leaders fail and what we need to do to have transformational leadership. So that's the program today. Promises to be interesting. Don't touch that dial. Don't don't stand up from your seat in case you're watching before your TV sets. Or, TV is on the move. You are watching us online. Let's quickly take a break. All right, welcome back to the program. Joining me right now is Dr. Tokpe Fashola, who is an economist, and we're looking at, what should I say, Nigeria's loans and debts. Welcome to you, Dr. Fashola.
Thank you very much.
Because I really don't even know how to categorize it. When I was taking a look at the loans so far, and if my team have it, quickly, let's put it on the screen. We really had to, go through how much President Buhari has borrowed since 2015. And okay, let's quickly take that. We saw that when President Buhari came in 2015, May precisely, President Buhari inherited about 700 and that's it there. Okay. President Buhari, that's even CBN's loans to the FG, inherited about 789 billion naira. And the loans rose to about 856 billion in December 2015, about 2.2 trillion naira in December 2016, 3.3 trillion naira in December 2017. It grew to 5.4 trillion naira in December 2018, 8.7 trillion naira December 2019, December 2020 grew to 13.1 trillion naira. I think I'm ahead of my of my team here.
Yeah.
But of course, all of you can hear me at home. 13.1 trillion naira by December 2020, 17.8 trillion naira by December 2021, 22.7 trillion naira by December 2022, and what we have right now about 23 trillion naira by that's CBN's Ways and Means to the federal government. Dr. Fashua, what's your view? Let's start from there. As I started the show today, I did say, and it's a statement of fact. Actually, it's not that I'm making it up, that President Buhari is Nigeria's biggest borrower, increasing Nigeria's total public debt.
It is true. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is true. Your statement is a statement of fact, and those numbers, the way you reeled it out, and the progression over time is, in one word, embarrassing. Given one fact, okay, two things. Given that we can't actually see anything tangible to say, this is the reason why we took this loan, this is what we have purchased with that loan. And secondly, because, of course, what you just showed us is the ways and means coming from the central bank, which is guided by a certain law, which says you can only take 5% of last year's revenue, collected revenue for the federal government. But you can also see that I think it may be something which is a longer dated tradition. The time President Jonathan was leaving, you already had 756 billion, which as at that time, given that the entire revenue collected by the FRS was in the region of 4 trillion, 5 trillion, meaning that the federal government's part of that revenue is at most maybe just a little bit over half of that, maybe out of 5 trillion, maybe 2.5 trillion, 25% of that, 5% of that is not supposed to be more than 125 billion. In this, so you can, but however, of course, that means that even as at then we had breached that law. But the magnitude of breach over time since 2015 is what is particularly very embarrassing. In 2016, we went into the first recession under this administration, which I've always maintained was an unnecessary recession. We oughtn't to have gone into that recession. The presidency, especially President Buhari himself, was very insular to all the complaints around him. That was when they asked him about the suffering of Nigerians, he would tell you, I'm not the one that brought it. You know, it was very embarrassing, and all of the mismanagement of the foreign exchange then. As of 2016, they also tried to remove the subsidy, fuel subsidy. They did remove it, and they informed Nigerians that, look, we're doing this first and final. However, unfortunately for them, and based on bad advice, they went and devalued the currency. So the 145 naira per liter that we moved to from 87 naira became 40 cents again, just as 85 naira per liter was 40 cents. Where people say, look, why would you be buying your home fuel at 40 cents, which is per gallon $1.60, when in the US they're buying at $5 or $4 and so on, which was what we wanted to meet, to say, okay, let us double this and see how we can maintain. So I'm advising again. I believe that now almost everybody has agreed that the subsidy, quote unquote, fraud has gone on for too long. All of those stories about fuel disappearing everywhere, whether we're using 90 million liters a day or whatever, you know, we want to end it so that whatever the NNPC is selling on behalf of Nigeria, they're mere agents of Nigeria. When you get the crude and you sell it, most of the money should come back as cash flow to Nigeria. Let's remove the subsidy. However, they should not devalue. If they devalue and remove subsidy at the same time, they will find themselves in the same spot, or even worse, as the case of Nigeria. I mean, so in 2016, we had that recession. What did President Buhari and his finance team do? They leaned on the central bank. Even though in those early days, they were leaning on the central bank, we were also collecting foreign loans under Kemi Adeosun, a lot. She believed that we should move in the foreign loan direction because it was cheaper in terms of the interest, but we warned her then. I personally warned her, wrote articles, warned her one-on-one as well, we're on a certain program together, that we will suffer what's called the exchange risk. Because the monies that we were borrowing at 199 naira to the dollar, today if we have to pay at 461 or thereabouts, meaning that we have to tax our system. at least twice over, almost thrice over, to tax and wring the money out of this system in order to repay or even to service. So, but that has gone. But okay, but by the time we were managing 2016 recession into 2017, 2018, 2019, there were no very bright ideas that were coming out of this government. No particularly wonderful idea. We had a lot of complaints from the Minister of Finance that our revenue, we had a huge shortfall. Our revenue to GDP ratio was one of the lowest in the world. The revenue, we had a revenue problem, even ignoring whether we had a borrowing problem, if we were not borrowing aright, or if we had an expenditure problem, if we were not spending aright. But the focus was on revenue problem. What was done about that? Nothing. I remember recently that even there was a proposal from the Minister of Finance to add 5% to telecoms, a 5% excise duty or tax to telecom, which was stepped down openly by the Minister for Telecommunications, which has been reintroduced recently. Yes, in the last raft of increases in taxes that were announced, the 5% is back. But the President Buhari, could not be assertive enough to call these two gentlemen together and say, my friend, what are you guys doing? Because when I looked at how much you could have got from that in terms of revenue, we're talking of about 500 billion naira. From that 5% alone, which was for me, indeed, it was a good tax. It's easily collectible. It may not be felt by most people. Maybe the people who use phone the most and use data the most are going to be the ones paying the 5%, not the person in the village. So anyhow, what we have seen is a scenario that the government, this particular administration, which is going in about 18 days, has not been particularly good at, I mean, that's putting it very, very mildly. They've been woeful in terms of economic management, in terms of getting great ideas, in terms of being a collegiate presidency where the best ideas will flow to the top. They've been, and so they leaned on the central bank to, however, it's not the end of the world, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll come back to that later.
Yes, we'll come back to that later. Let's go to the issue of this subsidy that everyone is talking about, and it seems that there's a consensus right now among the elites that fuel subsidies should be removed. However, that consensus is not among vulnerable Nigerians and poor Nigerians and many other Nigerians. The consensus among the elites: take off the subsidy, because what we are spending on subsidy, it's triple or even quadruple, or actually six times, not even triple, 6 times the budget for education, health, and some other social infrastructure. Agreed, one looking at it mathematically, you could say, oh, this makes sense, or even economically. But are you also taking a look at the other part in terms of how have we been able to to look at that subsidy, the efficiency and the effectiveness of subsidy? Because if you take a look at even some other oil-producing countries that have subsidies for their people, it's not done this way. The corruption is not there. There is transparency in terms of how much or what is the volume that Nigerians consume. So is that where perhaps we need to take a look at? And if we take a look at it, can Nigeria still afford it? Because what we are looking at now is that NNPC is the sole importer, and it's whatever they tell us, hook, line, and sinker, that we take. No one is interrogating. The many investigations that have gone have also gone on there. So what perhaps some people are also thinking is that they are trying to bamboozle us. Just take off the subsidy. How about those that have been corrupt, that have eaten the money from that subsidy? What happens to them? Should they just go like that? I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. And all of us now take off the subsidy, which makes economic sense. But how do you also juxtapose it with other, like MENA countries, other countries that produce oil?
Right.
The US produces oil, for example. Saudi Arabia produces oil. But what are the social things, social amenities that are available for their citizens? Even in Libya, for example, if you graduate, they give you a house if you want to marry, and all of that. That is not existent here. I hope you understand. I know you understand where all the things I'm trying to bring out.
Libya, I was like, wow, okay, so
no, but you know what I'm talking about.
Let's not even get to that point of Libya. Let's assume that as a people, let's continue to work hard for what we get, and let's not lean on government to give us some of those things. However, you made a valid point. Note also that in the UK, in the US, that we try to...
Let's not lean on government to do some things.
We can't lean that much on government. We're still in a trajectory as a people. And it's good to work hard. When you work hard and you make your money, you enjoy it better than when you're waiting and government will give me this. When I want to marry, government will give me that. that's a problem as well.
No, but you understand
But
what
I
I
understand
mean.
what
In terms
you're
of
saying.
social infrastructure.
Yeah, I understand, and we're going to get there. So basically, in those countries like US, UK, Europe that we like to compare with, even in Ghana, most of the fuel price they pay is taxes. In Nigeria, we don't pay that much taxes, on fuel. But when you look at the UK, it's almost 70%, 80% of the quoted price that people pay that is tax. That is how they have chosen to run their own country. So we should look at that point. Then number two is the fact that you mentioned NNPC is the sole importer for now. But remember, actually, where we're coming from is the pre-2012 scenario where a lot of people brought in, and a lot of it was fraud, and people would bring in water, load water on a tanker, and DPR and co will go and check it and say it's fuel. They will do the documentation. People collected 2.3 trillion naira in the year 2011 alone as fuel subsidy, most of which was fraud. And I'm not sure that maybe one or two people have even been convicted based on that. A lot of them are still playing in that sector. I think that was why NNPC came in. But of course, that also comes in with the monopoly disadvantage. If you are a monopoly, who checks you? Is NNPC an operator or a regulator? Are you an operator or a regulator? And we've seen all sorts of numbers. I did my research. If anybody is watching, you go to what they call worldpopulation.com or just type on your Google list of countries by fuel consumption. You will see everything there. In Niger Republic, they consume about 12,000 barrels a day in terms of fuel. That's what they consume. Nigeria is listed at about 336,000. Call it 400,000. This guy is in Cameroon, 42,000. In Benin Republic, 44,000. And in Chad, just 1,500 barrels a day is what they consume in the whole country. If you look at all of this, we say that we bring in so much fuel and it escapes to all of these countries. Those countries that surround us do not even have the capacity. If they were not importing anything on their own, if their government say, okay, we're not going to import this year, we'll wait for what we smuggle from Nigeria, they can't absorb what we say we're bringing in. They can't. So the whole idea of everything is escaping by the border is a farce. And that's why people say, okay, listen, let's walk away from this. Some guys are doing this, and the presidents that we have had seem not to be able to control it. So if we walk away from subsidy, what are we going to do? How do we even get out of the subsidy? My suggestion, I think, is doable. We should close our eyes and do it once and for all. However, two things. Diesel is selling at about 720, 750. In fact, it went down in the last few weeks. It was up to 900, 950. Whatever it is that happened, the truth is I know that diesel should not be that high in terms of the pricing. Meanwhile, diesel is being imported by different players, not only one person. So that means that there's some sort of price gouging going on there. If you realize that people don't have a choice but to buy your diesel, you can set any price to it and make a mega profit. When they talk about deregulation of an industry, it doesn't mean total lack of control. It means better regulation. When you have what we call something like natural monopolies like this, or oligopolies where a few people are involved, regulation must be hard and on point. That anybody that tries to take advantage of the members of the public must be slammed hard and made to pay. That's how it's done in the most capitalist countries of the world. Okay, so that's one part. We must make sure that, these guys do not continue to take advantage of people, no matter what happens later. The price of diesel, kerosene, which is selling at 1,100 naira per liter today, must also crash, whoever is bringing it in. And we're also hoping that Dangote will come in and be able to service us. Luckily, they said it will be the complex, which I hear is 7 times the size of Victoria Island, will be commissioned on 22nd of May. But wait, let me just
hang on. Let me just bring in this before I forget, since you talked about Dangote. Because it seems that Dangote Refinery, everyone is expecting that it will be the El Dorado. Don't you think that what Dangote Refinery would do is just to hedge the transportation risk?
Not necessarily. First of all,
do you understand? Because it's
crude
that is
part of it.
Internationally priced.
Oh, let me tell you what, it's going to be a lot more than that. So first of all, yes, the transportation risk is going to be taken out of it, or transportation cost is going to be taken out of it, okay? But most importantly, we will not have to look for, we imported, I checked the numbers, in 2021, the latest numbers I got, we spent $16 billion importing fuel in a year in this country. Okay, 16 billion, in fact, which is equivalent to everything we got from fuel. So when I looked at the export says that we sold $45 billion worth of crude oil. We imported $16 billion worth of fuel. But out of these $45 billion worth of crude oil, our own is barely 30%. That's what people don't know. We usually will carry a calculator and say, oh, Nigeria is selling 1-something billion. How much is the dollar? Dollar is this one. You know, I'm calculating like that. I say, how many barrels are we sending? No, we only get 30% out of the entire crude that's gotten out of this country. The rest goes to the manufacturing company, the IOCs, international oil companies, who are the ones that own the technical ability, the machinery that is used to, you know, under different kind of arrangement, if we are talking about the production sharing or the JV or whatever its arrangement it is. So let's be pragmatic. So if you look at 30% of 45, that is $15 billion, which is Nigeria's one. We haven't deducted the amount for running NNPC and all the subsidiaries and all the regulators. We're going to take it out of that.
The cost of production.
The cost of it, well, of course, even the cost of production,
yes,
you are very correct. The cost of production, the cost of running all the bureaucracies around it. And then we are importing $16 billion worth of fuel, meaning that at the end of the day, what comes to Nigeria here may be $9 billion. However, that $9 billion, the shortfall of this $16 billion, the fact that this $16 billion is full of subsidy. Of course, you are buying that, saying they're buying that $16 billion. But at the end of the day, when they fully sell, maybe they can't get more than 8 billion. So you see that we're in a mess, you know. So people believe we need to do that, but what can we do? I've suggested, if you want to really walk away from subsidy, you can segment the economy. Say, listen, everybody that works and gets paid every month, you can concede a little bit of their pay as you earn personal income tax back to them. You know, if people get maybe 10,000 naira back, additional to their salaries, like the government is adding to their transport allowance. If they get 20,000, don't give those guys that are earning so much. You know, people like you don't need it. You know, but the people down the rank and file. You know, somebody earning 60,000 naira, if you can get 6,000 naira back as additional, that's the money for transportation. It's additional. And you are not paying this 40% increase that government says it wants to pay.
So you are doing it for public sector workers?
No.
How about
public
private?
And private.
Private,
everybody
how? We are paying
Let
taxes.
me tell you what. Private is
CIT,
paying. No, wait.
company income tax.
We are giving back to them.
Yeah,
wait.
Okay.
But even the CIT, I'll get to CIT. But
should
PIT,
they reduce
personal
what the CIT
absolutely.
is?
Personal income tax should be tinkered with.
That's
state,
reduced.
This is due to states, so the presidency will have to talk to the state, call them together and say, guys, we need to do this. However, whatever you are losing here, because most of the state, all these things they call IGR, 80% of some state, 90% of some state is PIT. They are clawing back. When they pay salaries, what they call back is what they call IGR. But whatever it is you're going to lose there, you're going to get back on the FAC. Because all of a sudden, the monies that the fuel or the crude that NNPC is selling on behalf of Nigeria, all of a sudden has to come back to Nigeria as cash flow without you saying, oh, we've used that to pay subsidy. There won't be any need for subsidy. That's why Dangote is very relevant, not only in terms of transportation, also in terms of the dollar that it saves Nigeria.
Exchange risk.
Exactly. So now we may be able to accrete to reserves even much more than we were before. Moving from maybe 35 billion or wherever we are today, we may rapidly find ourselves in the $60 billion region in a couple of years.
Okay, let me now ask this question.
So not only PIT, also the CIT you mentioned. We can the government, incoming government,
because
can
the
use
CIT
this
is for companies.
for companies. You can use this to incentivize companies and say, listen, from 30% company income tax you are paying, some are paying 25%. Take 5% off each way. Say, listen, we're giving you something back. But guys, you know what? And now this is now going to give government the impetus to drive compliance. So having given you back, those companies that will collect payee from their staff and refuse to remit, the guy is chopping the money. The guy is using the money to trade. You understand that this is a federal crime. If you collect money, whether you're collecting payee from your staff, you're collecting National Insurance Trust Fund or NHIS or NSITF, you're deducting this from your staff salaries, which is their own money or their pension. Companies deduct pension in this country, they refuse to remit. So you know, by the time they slam you and fine you, look, there are so many opportunities to gain revenue in this country. We're just not serious, and we're killing ourselves.
Okay,
for whatever reason.
That brings me to the question, since you've come to Dangote refinery that will be launched May 22, the president will commission it. Dangote will be producing 650,000 barrels per day of oil. Now, from
processing.
yes, processing. From what you said earlier in terms of oil consumption, I quickly checked. And Nigeria's daily oil consumption is 428,000 barrels per day.
Depending on where you're looking.
No, I just checked what you said now. Now, all that is barrels per day.
What population?
Yes,
that,
yes,
that
yes. That's number. Nigeria is number 37. Now, where am I going? 1 barrel of oil produces 159 liters.
159
yes,
liters.
159 liters. Doing the maths, that's about 68 million liters per day.
Per day.
Now, if you take a look at what they say we are producing, what they say we are consuming about, we don't even know, 80, 85. During the Zani days, I knew it was she said then about 30, 35,
yes,
and during the Konjo-Iweala days, they were saying, yes,
45
million liters.
Senate,
now, where am I going to? With the Dangote refinery, 650,000.
It's over what we need. So you have 600.
You get it now.
If they actually process, and mind you, see,
yes.
Dangote, I think
but will that take our local consumption?
Yes, absolutely more. See, so that only Bejuleki is set to explode, really, literally speaking. So $650,000, what we need is
barrels, yes.
428 out of that.
Yes.
He also wants to export and get some dollars for himself.
Exactly.
You know, so but it's not only that. It is not only a oil refinery he has there. He has a fertilizer. They've already started. Yeah. He has a power plant, which I understand the capacity of the power plant can take care of the whole of Ibadan. That's maybe about 400 megawatts. You know, take care of the whole of Ibadan area up to Lagos and some parts of Lagos that IBEDC supplies to. So it's a whole raft. And of course, he also, being a private sector company, which is why the old NNPC refinery may not work anymore again.
Even with the turnaround that we put in it, even with the
only way to work,
partnership,
if you can find totally private sector people to drive it. A refinery is not something for public sector. We have learned over time. You know that the study of economics also evolves over time. We have now learned over time that there are some things. Refinery is a big business, it's serious business. The reason why those refineries are down was because you were using public sector mentality to run them. Then maybe somebody is supposed to come to work, he doesn't come to work, nothing happens to him. The guys are there, everybody is doing Wambe and all of that. Before you know it, all of those instruments begin to go to. And then there was sabotage as well. Somebody doesn't like Nigeria, or maybe one guy did him something, he removes one screw where he's not supposed to remove it. Those things are moribund. And the original equipment manufacturers are no longer servicing them. The NNPC cannot, as a public sector organization, run a refinery. A refinery will only be run by a private sector mentality where you hire and fire, and you do the necessary, and you're looking at your bottom line at every point in time.
Last question.
Unlike this instance where we've had people who don't do any work, but they get promoted and they're there working in a refinery. You don't work for 5 years, you get all your promotions, you travel abroad, you enjoy yourself and do everything that needs to be done. It's wrong.
Last question, and I would like us to bring that card, earlier on, the card on President Buhari's borrowings from the central bank. Last question, $800 million loan. A request from the National Assembly and approval. The World Bank.
I will urge the National Assembly to step it down. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Though I understand that the World Bank is part of the people encouraging us to take that loan, but we too should think for ourselves. It doesn't make sense, especially if you are saying you want to spend 5,000 naira for 10 million families. Where are the 10 million families? We spend trader money, we spend market money, we spend COVID money. We don't have the data. If there was a data, it should be openly accessible. INEC itself,
but the government will say they have a social register.
Where is the register?
Over
it should
a million
be open.
people.
It should be made open. People should be able to verify the data and say, oh, this family actually does exist. China has the data. They have the one that they are using for their targeted poverty eradication program. It's scientific. Everybody has a file. How many members of the social workers have visited any of these homes to just come and check on them and document what their issues are? It cannot work in this time that you just say, we've gone to that village, we spend 5,000. That is fraud. We are tired of fraud. So this government should step it down. 18 days. They should not commit the next government for the next 6 months to such a brainless idea. It's a half-cooked idea, if you ask me. You know, because we could use that money if the World Bank would actually let us have real access to that money, because I'm hearing a lot of things about those World Bank loans. Maybe at the end of the day, you may not get more than 50% of the money or so. We don't need all of those kind of things, okay? But if we had a good loan like that, we can say, okay, 800 million is about 400 billion naira. We share it to states, for example. Maybe Lagos wants to use his own to extend his metro line or to develop its waterways or something. Maybe Anambra State say, okay, listen, we have water. What can we do along our waterways? Can we do some dredging or whatever? So there's a way. We need to invest in more sustainable infrastructure, transport infrastructure, as a way of getting out of it. Or even if you say, well, for the next 2 years, we want to buy some buses from Innocent, which we want to get guarantee, use for the next 2 years. These are going to be subsidized transportation for all of our people, all over the state. Of course, we've done that.
Last years, we've done that before, where the buses are not working.
We may not be able to run away from that. We still have to continue to invest in such buses and so on. We have to, you see, it's about integrated transportation system, and this is an opportunity. This economy hasn't started, and we are not over-borrowed at all. At all. We haven't even started borrowing.
No, the only problem we have is revenue,
Nancy, the only problem we have is that
yes, revenue and spending.
Yeah, I know. The only problem we have is that we wait for disasters to push us into borrowing. We spend the money on disaster. Wise countries spend their money on real things that impact their people. Things that you will see, infrastructure that changes the lives of their people. And I'm hoping that the next government is going to be thinking around that. 35% debt to GDP is nothing. When countries like Gabon, 100%, Ghana, 100%, Kenya, 80%.
But we know what Ghana is.
UK,
don't even go to Ghana now. You know what Ghana is experiencing right now. Ghana's economy is in a mess.
Ghana is not the standard. UK is 110%, US 130%, Italy 170%, Greece 250%,
but you won't compare us to
Japan
them. You said earlier we shouldn't compare to them.
So we are giving you across different regions.
I know. Even Japan is more than that.
So the only reason we will say we're not borrowing is because we don't have any idea what to do to improve our economy or to make the lives of our people better. And we should get better ideas.
We'll leave it at that, Dr. Fashola. This conversation will still continue because it's something that has different layers to it, and we'll continue on the program. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Tope Fashola has been speaking with me, at least in the last few minutes. We've been talking about Nigeria's rising debt